I have the elevator music to get y'all comfortable and settled in. Thank y'all so much for being here. I think I'm going to go ahead and get started in the interest of time. How's everybody feeling this morning?
Great.
Good. Enjoying the Unite conference so far?
Yes.
Good. We're excited that you are here. I'm Ashley Stevens. I'm senior content producer and host at Black Enterprise, the #1 Black digital media brand. And for those of you that may recognize some of your faces, I spent most of my career at UNCF, both in development and in communications. And anybody here from South Carolina? We got any Columbia folks? Any Orangeburg folks? Okay, good. Hey, to my South Carolina folks. I'm in South Carolina and offer news on WFMV in Columbia and also WPDT in Florence. So you can catch me on the news there on the gospel stations.
Right.
So we're excited to have you for this important discussion. Is AI helping or hurting HBCUs? And by any means, I am nobody's AI or science expert, so I want to make that very clear. I'm a media person, but I had the privilege of looping in some top folks who do work in this space at AI, and also faculty members who are learning this as it comes along and learning what it means for the classroom, what it means for teaching and learning. All right? So again, this session will explore the impacts of AI on HBCUs today and tomorrow. Something interesting I want to share. Mo Gaudat, the former chief business officer of Google X, who's also an AI expert, he's been doing a lot of interviews lately, quote, warning people of the dangers of AI, and said, AI will not be stopped and will be 1 billion times smarter than the humans by 2045. Further, he says, I have spent my career fascinated by the role that technology plays, and now the biggest challenge humanity has ever faced is upon us. Artificial intelligence is the culmination of technological advancement, and it is in my view that it will be unprecedented in defining the way the world is shaped. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about what they do at their respective HBCUs. First, we have Dr. Charmaine Patterson, Director of the Center for Innovative Teaching, Learning, and Engagement at Clark Atlanta University. Show your love, Dr. Next, we have Dr. Jerry Volsey, Co-Director of the Spelman Innovation Lab and the Brown Simmons Professor. Dr. Volsey. And we have Dr. Musina Morris, Director and Principal Investigator of Morehouse in the Metaverse. And last but not least, Dr. Karina Lyles, Chair of the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at the Claflin University. So I'll now turn it over to each of them to tell us a little bit more about what they do in their day-to-day lives at HBCUs. Dr. Patterson?
I will go first. Can you all hear me, or do I need the microphone? Okay. So, I am the director of the Center for Innovative Teaching, Learning, and Engagement at Clark Atlanta University. The CETL, as we call it, is tasked with providing support for our faculty. And I believe that in this AI space, that is one of the things that I'm really representing here. The faculty interest, the ways in which faculty perceive, and then as a consequence of that, the ways in which they engage artificial intelligence at the institution, whether it's in their courses, actual content within their courses, or sometimes it's the ways in which they manage course, engage in the course management system, things of that nature. Aside from that, though I am not a scientist, either a computer scientist or a natural scientist, I am one of those individuals who writes about the sciences. You know, they say there's some who do, and then there are some who write about those who do. And so I'm currently working on a manuscript on the history of the STEM fields and related initiatives at HBCUs. So this is something that is also not just in the personal day-to-day work, but also my own research and scholarship.
Good morning, or is it good afternoon yet? I think someone. Good morning, I'm Jerry Volsey. I am the founding director of the Spelman Innovation Lab. That lab is tasked with bringing new technologies to the campus and allowing faculty and students in mostly the humanities, the arts, and the social sciences to leverage that technology. So it's a bridge between the STEM and the non-STEM. I came to Spelman about 10 years ago via industry. I spent about 20 years as an engineer in practice. came to Spelman, worked in the faculty in the computer sciences department for a while, and now I am full-time focused on the works of the Innovation Lab. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ashley, will you cue the video?
Absolutely. See how special she is? She said, listen, we got a whole video to explain what's happening.
University.
Welcome to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. I am Dr. Messina Morris.
Dr. Messina Morris is a Metaversity Director and Assistant Professor of Education at Morehouse College.
I actually am the first Metaversity Director to exist around the globe, and Morehouse College is the first Metaversity. We've been moving full steam ahead from 3 classes originally to now over 13 courses a semester.
A biomolecular chemist, Morris first started teaching in the metaverse in 2021 to try and keep students engaged during the pandemic. Metaversities are virtual interactive learning spaces based on real or imagined environments. To make a digital twin campus, modelers and designers used hundreds of images and geographic data to build the same environment in virtual reality. Teachers can customize their classrooms with extra features like 3D models or fantasy locations. Morris and Morehouse worked with educational virtual reality developers Victory XR on a custom-built digital twin campus.
This is the main quad where we have graduation.
The digital twin was really important for the work that we were doing simply because in so many times we offer software or these applications where Black young men don't see themselves reflected in that space, and having the digital twin for us means that they take more ownership and autonomy over being in that space and what they want it to look like.
When I first saw the Metaversity, my first impression was, oh my God, it was very surreal. Learning in virtual reality has been amazing. The things that I'm reading on the page, I can see them and really touch them in virtual reality. So it connects the dots for me.
As you see, this is a digital replica of our real chemistry lab. Really cool things I'm going to show you right now.
Morris says practice in the virtual lab can help students perform better in the physical environment.
We have our safety shower.
VR classes are taught both in the classroom and remotely. But either way, Morris says being in the virtual space helps students stay focused.
I've seen students gain mastery of concepts much quicker than they have in a classroom space where their phone might be going off. So it's really good at making efficient use of time.
Morehouse College is one of 30 digital twin campuses across the U.S. being built by Victory XR with funding from Meta. For Morris, it's been a dream come true.
It restored joy in the education system, and you see student achievement increase by 11.9%. It makes you rethink what your other approaches have been in the past and why did we wait so long to do something this transformative.
Isn't that awesome? See, thank you.
But at least one person got sick inside of a Delta plane that was stuck on.
And Dr. Greta Lyles from Claflin.
Well, I don't have a video. Not gonna do a dance. But hi everyone, I'm Karina Lyles. I chair the Mathematics and Computer Science Department at Claflin University. I also run our smart home that we've newly started, and it's a focus on health disparities, which AI is gonna have a lot to do with that as we move forward. We're actually in the process of working on African American health data set, which is something that does not exist. And so now we're looking at how do we gather our data and then produce outcomes that represent and reflect us. I'm especially excited to be on this panel because I'm a product of the AU Center. I am a Spelman alumna, and so my panelists, I'm happy to sit beside you today and talk about this important work.
Awesome. Let's show our panelists some love. Top-notch folks here with us, and again, thank you all for being here with us as well. Let's get right into it. What is AI? You know, some of you have devices at home that talk to you and you tell it to shut up because you didn't ask her that, and she turns off lights and she adjusts the thermostat. And then have you all seen, even on some college campuses, there's robots that deliver food to the dorms? Have you seen some of those? So There's all different types and concepts, and I can't explain it, but I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Lyles to explain AI, the different types of it, and how we use it every day.
Alright, so we're most familiar with just traditional AI. And with AI, we're looking at data and it's producing patterns. So it's taking content that's already there, that already exists, and giving some kind of output or some type of outcome. And so this is how we use it to make decisions, whether it's a robot deciding if I need to make a left turn or a right turn based on an obstacle, or whether it's your Siri device or your Alexa device that's just looking at your patterns and trends inside your home. But now we're moving to a space of generative AI, which is completely new, and it's something we're all learning together as it comes about. But what generative AI does is it creates new outcomes, it creates new outputs. So it doesn't have to use what's already there to spit out some outcome. It can make something totally new based off the data that it has on hand. And so that's what now makes this so mind-blowing, because it's almost as if we were humans thinking of things and coming up with our ideas. Now we have machines that can do the same thing.
Got it. And folks, please be thinking of questions. As you have them, we'll take questions throughout the program as well. So please be thinking of any questions that you might have. So thank you for breaking that down for us in terms of what AI is. Now let's talk about how is it currently being used on each of your campuses.
Well, I guess I can begin and sort of speak to, I guess some of these different ways that AI are being employed I'm sorry, I keep wanting to just talk. I can speak to the ways in which AI is being utilized on Clark Atlanta University's campus. I know that for within our admissions office that they implemented a chatbot, which is AI, and it's the kind of thing that we are increasingly comfortable with because we deal with that on a day-to-day basis in our institutions. But those kinds of AI, I think, are less problematic or perhaps considered to be less dangerous for us. So we already see that there are spaces in which those things can be used, to sort of answer frequently asked questions, to help become more efficient in terms of customer service and improving the customer service experience. So that is one of the ways that we are finding that it's being used on at our institution, even outside of the classroom.
Thank you. Wilson?
Sure. Maybe I'll take a step back and talk a little bit about when we say what is AI, just broadly speaking, right? We're trying to replicate human intelligence in a machine. We're trying to get a machine to duplicate what we do in our minds. We've been using it ever since the computer first got into your campus way back in late 80s or early 90s, right? So intelligence is in scale. I think we all recognize that biologically it's intelligence in scale. Like humans more intelligent than dogs more intelligent than worms, and so on and so forth. And so we can think about intelligence in scale when we think about it in the digital space as well, right? Supercomputers are more intelligent than microwave ovens and so on and so forth. Up until now, though, the thing that's really differentiated biological intelligence from machine intelligence has been the ability to think, right? We even if you think about machine intelligence, biological humans can think, whereas the machines are just executing algorithms. With this generative AI, that line is starting to blur. And so now we have this conversation we're having. It's not because AI is new, but because with this generative AI, we start to see whispers of machines that appear to think. And so there's a question about, well, do they really think or do they really not think, right? And so we find ourselves in this place where we seem like we're at the cusp of creating machines that could replicate actual intelligence, but at the same time, we're not sure if we're 100 years away. Is this something that's really possible or not? So in terms of how it's used on our campuses, it's always been used. It's just that this new thing that's coming out, I can't speak to how it's used yet because it's so new, but it's clearly something that's promising to be very disruptive. And so the question is, what do we do about it? How should we position ourselves? How do we understand it in terms of what it is and what it is not, right? A lot of times we make the mistake of personifying it and saying, like ChatGPT is a person, right? ChatGPT can do this and ChatGPT can do that, but the reality is it's a reflection of the contributions of 100 million people that have contributed to the data that was used to train that engine. And so we shouldn't be comparing, our abilities and what we can do with ChatGPT. We're really comparing it to the collective experiences of 100 million people. And therein lies where the disruption could come on different things that we do on our campus. We'll probably elaborate, touch on that a little bit more as questions come.
So artificial intelligence is not new. It's a discipline, just like chemistry is, just like physics, just like any other major that students embark upon. It's just that it has always been housed in either a software engineering department or computer science, sometimes mathematics. And so it's been an elective that has been around or a part of a course of study for quite some time. Human beings have always been trying to figure out how to make work easier for them, how to be more productive, how to make most use of time, and this is no different. So it's not really something to be afraid of because we've really already in iterative ways been introduced to it. So I'm gonna use an example because I have 5 sons and a gamer husband. So how many people played video games back in the 80s or 90s where you played against the computer, right? So that computer was a program. That computer that played against you when you thought you were winning Duck Hunt and somehow it got harder and more difficult, right? That computer, while it played on different levels of difficulty, that algorithm was set, right? What's happening now is that these computers can say, well, they play this way and they know how to outmaneuver me even on this setting. And I've learned from this particular player how they play. And so now I'm going to think of a new strategy. That's what's going on now. That's that generative AI where you're coming up with a new output, a new way of doing something in response to the inputs, right? Like you're delineating your own trends and patterns from a lot of unstructured, what we call unstructured data. So data that's not labeled as anything in particular, right? And letting it come up with patterns and trends and things that it sees and then produce a new output from that thing. That's what we're talking about now in terms of generative AI. What we're doing on Morehouse's campus is we've started an AI task force. So Dr. Kenneth Gaucher, who is the Center Director for Broadening Participation in Computing, he has always been a proponent of AI and started working with chatbots that help students find their career pathways at Morehouse for quite some time. What we are seeing now, though, is that open use of AI for all. So accessibility is now different. You don't have to go into his lab and access his model sets and then work with them. You are now able to just access it on a web browser. Now we have apps that tap into these large language models. And so that's where we're starting to get into, what do we do as HBCUs? And my advice is to embrace it. Embrace it because within all of our disciplines and all that we do, not just gaming or entertainment or our life, but in everything we do at the future of work, you will be required to utilize some type of AI generated system, AI models, because to be quite honest, baby boomers are leaving. They're leaving the workforce. They were our largest generation. Work is going to increase for every single one of us. There will be more jobs and more opportunity than there are people to do the work. And what we are all gonna wanna know is how to make doing the work of 6 people easier, and AI is just a step in a way that we can do that to alleviate some of the tediousness of the work that we have to do, because we're gonna have to do it in order to live the same quality lives. And so we must teach our young people that same thing.
Dr. Lyles, how's it being used at Claflin?
We're still figuring that out, but the students are taking it, they're 10 steps ahead of us. My students actually very slowly, slightly reluctantly told me about ChatGPT, and that's how I even first heard of it. And they're using it in their assignments. They're using it for their scholarship essays. They're using it for research. And at Claflin, we are embracing it because we do see the potential and we see what it can be and where it can take us. I like to really describe it as we describe generational wealth. Some people are just already ahead. And so we can either choose to jump on this train now and stay ahead, stay with the wave, or it's gonna leave us behind because others are still going to use it. Doesn't matter what we say, or if we say, oh no, we're not doing it, if we say, oh no, it's not happening, the rest of the world is doing it. Exactly. And so we just need to figure out how do we best use it so that it can help us get ahead and stay ahead. So we are using it in our classes. We're using it for research. I had students starting now to use it. I actually, Dr. Volchi, I named mine. She's Giselle. She's a part of my team. She's kind of human to me. So, yes. But I find that now when I'm trying to think of, I need to do a survey for this, and I can throw, even when we was making our AI statement to the students that needs to go in all our syllabi, we started with a statement. We started with a nice, lovely draft. But then I threw it into ChatGPT because I needed something cleaner, something a bit more succinct. And so I'm finding how to even use it more in my everyday work life, and trying to make it just more second nature, because sometimes it feels like an additional task, but now it's becoming a bit more natural to me. And then I still have some students who don't know about it. And so the biggest thing on our campus is that equity piece, because we want all students to have that equal access. We want all students to be fully informed and aware, as well as our faculty, because we're showing faculty how to leverage it as well. So outside of the academics, we're also looking at the support services. So how do we use it for admissions? How do we use it for institutional advancement? How do we use it in those other areas as well that help our university continue to thrive? Excuse me.
This is really interesting. By show of hands, how many of you actively and knowingly use some form of AI on your campuses every day, right? About half the room. In your personal life, how many of you use it? Okay, a good mix of the room. You had a question?
I do.
Sure.
I'm Chris Wright. I work for a Common Application. Real quick question regarding like the biases associated with AI. How are you countering some of those conversations on your campuses? Just curious if you've even had those conversations around biases.
We have, and that's why it's jump in where you are. Jump in where you are. Your diverse voice needs to be heard. Black people are not a monolith, but usually there's one software engineer at the table. There's one person that has scaled their way up to the top that gets that seat at the table, and they have to participate as if they are a monolith and speak for all of us. Well, this is a different kind of situation. We now have the opportunity to access these large language models, to build businesses around them, to increase our own productivity, knowledge that we haven't always had access to. We don't have sometimes even the time to get to places that can assist you. So you might have the SBA in your neighborhood, but you need a business model in order to get this loan. It'll give you a head start. So it's just that our workflow has changed. It's not that we are dependent upon it. It's that just like Google revolutionized the way we search, it wasn't that we didn't have searches before. Remember Ask Jeeves? It's just an iterative process of us evolving how we digitally connect and how we use technology. For us, it means that you need to partake in developing these models, because the more they know you, the more that they'll be able to give more accurate and reflective answers. That's why it's important for us not to shy away from the technology, but to embrace it, know the risk involved, but don't put your head down and say, that's just something I'm not going to embrace, because you will face it, whether it is on your job or in your home with your children as they are going through school. You're going to have to face it. So it's time now for you to step up and get involved, even in a small way, right? It doesn't have to be huge and you don't have to use it for anything, but practice building up that skill set.
I really like to echo Dr. Morris's sentiments. We were both in the room when Sam Altman came to Clark Atlanta University in, I believe it was April of 2023. And in the audience, when there were audience questions, that was a lot of what was being posed, was not so much the concerns about AI, I guess more from an academic standpoint, but are the ways in which we know and recognize that there are biases associated with this. And so what the consensus was, both from Altman and the other panelists, but really in the room, was the recognition that if we aren't participating, if we aren't contributing, if we aren't involved in the process, those kinds of biases continue. We know that they're there, but what can we do to help alleviate them, to help to dismantle them? And the only way that that happens is if we have a much broader cross-section and more active participation from individuals that look like us.
Speaking of Sam Altman,
And tell us who he is. Tell us who he is.
Oh, Sam Altman is the CEO and founder of OpenAI, which brings forth ChatGPT, DALL-E, and some other applications in this industry. But he came to speak at Clark Atlanta University, and now let me tell you, I'm a proud Clark Atlanta University alum. Yes, I am. Class 2000, that millennial class. And I was happy to see him. I was in California for ASU GSV conference, and he was supposed to speak. The room was packed out, but guess what? He couldn't even make it in. So he had to do it virtually because his flight was delayed. And then the following week, he's at Clark Atlanta. You don't say. So anyway, I just thought that it was so brilliant that he thought enough to contact John Hope Bryant and to say, hey, I want to hear what your community voices sound like. How can we pull together some academicians, some people in the neighborhood, students, and the Atlanta University Center is rich with institutions of higher learning, and even the Atlanta area, we know that. So it was just wonderful to be heard, right? To be seen. And I've since talked to him about it, and there are some concerns that he has, but the hope is to make sure that information is accessible to all people. What it really is to make sure that you have an opportunity to thrive in your gifts, and that you're able to contribute to an ever-evolving system. It's going to change the way that we operate as humanity, but we have to make sure that we are in it now so that we can start to talk about the concerns and the ethical considerations that it takes, because we don't want people to also be taken for this. We know the ill effects of it too, right? So we know that people have been using it to ransom, kind of like as a ransom for people. They can change and modify your voices. They can, change your photograph and put up things that are not true about you and all those kind of things. And so there's going to have to be regulation about the way that these are used. But y'all remember AOL chat room? Okay, we didn't get there overnight, right? We didn't get from certain places overnight. And so this is like no other, technological tool. It's just that people adopted it quite sooner because we had already been dealing with technology and needing technology to communicate. And I think that this new wave of the way that we understand and the way that we work and the way that we live is going to be something that we're going to have to face. We're going to have to take part in it and let our voices be heard.
I just want to briefly add that awareness is important. And that's the first step of this, because it's the information that's coming on the back end that's biased already. And so, which is why we want to create the Black African American healthcare data set. This is why we want to be owners of our language models, because that's where the bias comes in. It's already built into the system. Systemically, biases have been built into the systems for everything, and now this is no different. And so that there's the equity is extremely important, but it's only spitting out what's already there. And so when we talk about the bias, we need to look at what the data say and what's already existing. And that's how we start to make that change, is to know. But being aware of it, now you can say when you see what comes out, so being over the common application, you know what to look for, you know what to expect, you know that some people may be excluded. And so then that's how you are aware and can kind of counteract some of the effects of what the biases are doing to us.
I like that about the bias, but Dr. Volsi had something to add.
Well, I'm just going to have really quickly that there is a slight silver lining here. if you go to one of these websites that generate fake humans, you sit there and you ask it to generate human. I mean, it's one white person after the other, after the other, after the other. And what that tells you is that the data that's used to train these systems excludes like 2/3 of the human population. Right? And so the data if you're talking about ChatGPT and BART and all those, there's not a whole lot you can do in terms of dealing with bias other than just being aware of it, because the data is what it is that's used to train it. But what that means, though, is that in terms of these systems' ability to displace different people, different careers, the people who are not in that data are the most protected, right? So in other words, trying to replace an African American actor or behavior or facial features and all that, that's the most difficult for these systems to do because we're not in the system. Right? So as it turns out, the people who do not have access or who are not putting content out there that feed these systems are the ones who are the most protected in terms of resistance to being able to being displaced.
This is really interesting. I'm getting a lot out of this. And we're gonna move, we talked about ways to embrace, we're gonna move to concerns in just a minute. We have 2 audience questions. Yes, please stand.
Yeah. My name is Edgar Spitana from Talladega College. Speaking from the faculty panel, I'm the faculty member. And on AI, we're very hesitant, with regards to research. You're writing papers and, that type of. So we don't really know what is out there with regards to journals, what they're accepting, what the policies are. So that is an area, if you can speak to that, So most of my colleagues, it's like this new thing, you want to spend time to write research, but you want the research that will stand. You don't want to write a paper after a year, this target somehow. So we don't really know. So we in that space of trying to learn what are these journals, what is acceptable and what is not with regards to leveraging AI to enhance research abilities.
I think if you think in terms of like just fact checking all of your work yourself, that's still a thing that is valued, and why you are a subject matter expert in your field, right? Is that you vetted all of the work and all of the research that you have already compiled or learned from. So in terms of being a faculty member and how to use it in terms of writing grants, I always say that it gives a great start. There are wonderful templates. It gives you a framework to start with. It is by no way the end product. I think using it as an end product, unrefined, unlearned, untaught, and not adding your true voice into it is a mistake. It's a mistake because I feel like we're trying to replicate our intelligence. So that means that, and we haven't been able to do that. That artificial intelligence of just a machine acting completely human, that doesn't exist. But what I do know is that we can use it to refine our own skills. We can use it if you're stuck as a thought partner to brainstorm, to work through some things that maybe you just hadn't thought of and you don't have enough people to access information from. It's a great tool to use in partnership with, but by no means should it be reflective of your final work.
So I understood the question to be yes to everything you just said, but I also understood the question to be, what is acceptable in this space of intellectual work? Is it acceptable for me to write a paper that ChatGPT helped you write? Even if it's my own work and the data is correct, is that an acceptable practice? If some of us did that, would we tell our colleagues, I actually use ChatGPT, or is that taboo, right? So there's a whole culture that needs to evolve, and an understanding of what the lines are between what is acceptable and what is not, that I think the journals need to think about, I think the faculty needs to think about, I think we as a society need to think about, what's acceptable and what's not. I mean, is the paper that I submitted to the journal 100% my work, or is it okay that I used an AI to help me iron out the kinks in the grammar? I'm not sure, but if I did it, I'm not sure I would tell everybody.
People use Grammarly, people use Outright, people use other things, the Dragon, the transcribers, the going back in. So people have been using these types of tools for such a long time. No, I don't want to submit a paper to a journal to be peer reviewed where I know, but there are other software that is coming out to combat, and they already have some, I just don't know specific names off the top of my head, where they can check to see whether it was generative AI. They already have tools where you can go through and recognize large pieces or strings of information that possibly couldn't be, just from a human. We make a fair amount of mistakes, and we all have different ways in which our language.
So the question though is, I've done my research, I've got my data, it's all my work, and I've asked the AI to help me write it up. And then someone takes my paper and the AI says, yep, this text was generated by an AI.
But it wasn't.
There has to be some way to quote it though, right? Like there has to still be some way, even when Wikipedia came out and people were saying that wasn't a resource, there's still a way that we're gonna have to come up with a way academically where you're able to attribute, right, the work that you're doing to AI that in some way that is assistance, and it's going to become acceptable on some level, a certain percentage of your work perhaps, or running through a particular algorithm that shows how much, but there's going to have to be some system that counteracts that so that we can prohibit those types of behavior.
I was just going to say that we are in the spaces and we find this for our students, so we're also seeing this for ourselves, that there are now these programs that say that they can identify AI, these AI detection tools. You said that you were thinking of one, and Turnitin is a prime example. Yeah. And so Turnitin can be used for our students. I want to say it was April or May, they came out with their AI detection service. But the challenge is that there are a number of instances where they identify false positives. They're essentially saying that students plagiarized, or that it's a portion that is AI generated, and it can be, from a low of maybe 18% to as much as 100%, like this is completely AI generated, and that's creating some pause. When we talk about some of the concerns, that is one of those, because some students readily will, fall on their sword. I did it, and I'm sorry, and I will never do it again. And then there are others who will fight and resist and protest and insist that they did not utilize AI, or they didn't use it to the degree that's reported. And as a consequence of that, we know that these tools are now having to sort of walk back, or at least offer disclaimers for their services and say, we're just giving you an indication that there's potential AI, detection here. And so that's one of those things that it's certainly, again, in the space in which I operate, that we have to be really mindful of.
And there's an arms race going on, right? Because these AI, ChatGPT in particular, is really good at really good at metacognition. You can ask it, why do you think this was generated by an AI? And it will tell you why. And then you can tell it, can you generate something that you can't tell that was generated by AI? And it can generate that for you, right? And so there's tactics and counter tactics, and it just kind of goes back and forth, back and forth.
So I'm gonna play a clip, and this is again from the gentleman that worked at Google. The Google exec. Then I'll come to Dr. Lyles. We're going to talk about some concerns, and then we have another question in the audience. So take a listen to this.
Let's put this in perspective. ChatGPT today, if simulate IQ, has an IQ of 155. Okay, Einstein is 160. Smartest human on the planet is 210, if I remember correctly, or 208 or something like that. Doesn't matter, huh? But we're matching Einstein with a machine that I will tell you openly, AI experts are saying this is just the very, very, very top of the tip of the iceberg, right?
So he's saying we've not even yet to see what all that this can do, how far that this can go. I'm curious, by show of hands in the audience, how many of you know for sure that you've had students write essays or turn in assignments that were generated by ChatGPT? Now that's who knows for sure. How many of you suspect? Okay, so our panelists, how many of you know that student work has been generated by, and how do you know? How do you find out? How do you tell the difference? I'm gonna start with Dr. Lyles. How do you know that students maybe, or faculty and staff, how do you know that work is not original? And are we limiting creative thoughts and original work by having AI, or is it helping us to be smarter?
That's a tough one. I did a course, artificial intelligence, quite funny, last spring, and I put every assignment through ChatGPT, and it gave a suitable answer. Even if it was a C-level answer, it gave a suitable answer to pass a course. Although there was one assignment that my students said they couldn't figure out how to get ChatGPT to give the right answer. So I was like, yeah, you can't play the kid. You know what I'm doing? But you don't know, right? Or at least not right now, you don't know. And as far as like the Turnitin and those kind of tools that help determine it, I need to know more about how they do it before I can be on board about them actually being able to decipher and determine if AI was used. But a lot of it is knowing your students. And so now it's gonna require doing some more in-class assignments, in-class writing, in-class programming, because then once you learn your student, then you know. You didn't do this. You didn't do this. And then it's also helpful for the follow-up. So if they're able, so the big piece here is making sure learning is happening, right? We still want to make sure our students are gaining what they need so that they can be independent thinkers, so that they can be productive citizens. Those are the things that we really care about. And so it's okay if they can use ChatGPT for assignments. And I'm just speaking personally because even at Claflin, we're allowing faculty to determine if they want to use it or not. So I don't want to impose that everybody has to use it, that concept on everyone. But for me, it's okay if they use it, especially if it helps them to articulate their ideas, especially if it helps them to still better understand some concepts and thoughts. So then when they're talking to me, they're speaking intelligently, because there's only so much if they're using ChatGPT, if they're using a human, if they're using some resources online, and they're copying all their information and turning assignments, then they're not learning. But if they're able to use that and still gain something, but then they can talk to me and being an expert in my field, I can tell though they're still new, right? And so we all know how to talk as those leaders in these areas, to talk to our students and ask those probing questions and figure out what they know and what they don't know, and then take them up the Bloom's taxonomy in terms of, all right, you can recall some information, but can you actually produce? Or can you actually do this? Because ChatGPT can write code, and that's a computer sciences that blew my mind. But now I'm looking at it as, okay, it can also critique your code. It can also give new suggestions, and so now I want my students to use it as a tool so that they can be better programmers.
Yeah.
I was just simply going to suggest that ChatGPT and some of these other tools should be used as a means of reflection and analysis. I think that that's one of the ways that it would be most effective. But in speaking to my own personal experience with knowing that a student had not generated their own original material, one of the ways that was really simple for me is that ChatGPT does not do well with citations.
Right.
It
makes them up.
Put that out there. It makes them up. And so that was a giveaway for me. I was reading an assignment. It was a final assignment. And I said, again, knowing your students, I've gone through this entire semester with them, and this looks different. But then also by the time I got to the end, I just started looking at the citations, and I said, that's not real, and that's not real, and that's not an actual resource or source. And so it was very easy. I mean, I had the suspicion, but then again, by the time I got to the end, recognizing what I know about their issues with citations, that was something that was relatively easy for me to be able to discern. So I think that part of it is that you do have to be able to know your students and to move them through the process. And if you engage with them through the semester, you'll be able or better able to recognize when the writing is not theirs, when the writing seems significantly different from something that they had produced or generated before. But then again, also just, being mindful that citation becomes an issue. And in a lot of ways, that's the tell, because they're like, if it's got citations in it, so, it's good, but not so much.
Professor Jones?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that what they were saying, the question. Yes. So hi, Levine Jones. I teach. I'm the entrepreneurship metaverse instructor at Morehouse College. Dr. Morris is my director. She's amazing. But so for my students, doing business model canvas, interviewing entrepreneurs, doing case studies, I give them very specific formats to follow, and they have to follow my rubric and have to follow my format. And what I noticed is they would just put the whole thing in ChatGPT. And it would give them a good answer, but it wasn't in my format. So you still didn't do the assignment. So given specific instructions, specific format, they have to interview entrepreneurs. They have to interview venture capitalists. ChatGPT can't come up with an interview for somebody that's not well known, right? So those type of things I was very easily able to identify those students that use ChatGPT and those that didn't by giving them those specific formats to follow.
And so you're also saying that some of your assignments required actual connection.
Yes.
Like you had to reach out to someone to generate
specific
the response. That's helpful. There's a question, this gentleman, I want to come here first because you did have a question, sir, with the glasses, then I'll come back.
Well, I was going to actually, I could agree with Dr. Morris and Dr. Lau that we should in fact embrace ChatGPT as a resource and not the devil in the classroom, but I think we have to consider the input all the students have in the beginning and qualify that with the output that that's received. You can really get around that if you have the students to provide a focused statement. That's a statement that must go to ChatGPT, so you understand what the student began with the process, so you then have the students synthesize the output.
Here, and then at the back, and then I'll come to this side. Yes, ma'am, in the green.
So, Tanya, I'm Claudia, Assistant Vice Provost, Distance Ed, Extended Learning at North Carolina A&T State University. And I am listening, you got the Megan Pratt in? So I am listening and wanting to take us up a little bit, transactional versus transformation. We're talking about a lot of things that are reactionary, and so it's also a question and an appeal. We're talking about human beings and their transformation, and not that everything is information knowing alone. So what type of people are we trying to inspire so that ethics and why someone would want to do a shortcut? What kind of worker do you want to be? And we have to be very, very careful with even our well-meaning public, private, industrial connections. Transformation and not transaction, we're just getting skills. We're people. There's a heart, there are ethics, and there are decisions that need to be made. So the values of our institutions and inspiring the people that would not make some of those choices. And I'm just wondering how much of that ethics is a part of that instead of trying to block and tackle.
Right, but that is exactly why I propose that we embrace it.
Exactly.
Because we are the subject matter experts and leaders in our communities within our HBCUs. And if we don't train our young people on how to have a moral compass, how to have ethical consideration for the work that they do, to do it in excellence and to make sure that it is representative of them and as a purpose, that they're purpose driven in the way that they're doing things and that they're intentional about the way that they present information and research, then we're gonna have a problem. The thing is, other institutions are not gonna stop using AI and incorporating it, and we have got to be just as innovative and just as savvy in the way that we educate our young people now. The old lecture model is not going to work because the workflow of the students have changed, their access to information has changed, their respect level for us has changed. And it's changed because a lot of the young people feel like we're not meeting them where they are. This is where they are. And yes, we do have standards that they should come up to, but at some level, you got to go down and reach down and grab some of them and take them up the right way. And so it's like train up a child in the way that you think that they should go. And that is our responsibility. So these conversations are important. Embracing it is important. Coming up with parameters and stipulations and statutes that incorporate it and use it within every discipline. That's our task. That is our goal. Every student who is entering the workforce now must be technologically adept. I don't care who you are. You might say, I don't want to be on social media and I don't want to embrace this. Well, you're going to get left behind in the workforce because the future of work is all automation, data science, machine learning, and all of the things that are like kind of encompassed around those things. And I don't care if you're a political science major. If you're a political science major, when you canvass neighborhoods and when you get data from people, you're going to have to synthesize that data. And what are you going to use? Are you going to sit there yourself and regroup them? You're not. But how do you do it in a way that that maintains your humanity, maintains the dignity of the human being. When sociologists are thinking about new approaches and new techniques, when me as an educator are looking at pre-service teachers that are going in a classroom and I have to talk to them about it, I have to talk to them about using these tools in a way that is going to help grow the student mind and allow them to come up to the intelligence level. We are too far behind to say that we're not going to use everything, including the kitchen sink, to throw at us. When we have 14-year-old children, and I'm K-12 certified in the state of Georgia, science 6 to 12, but I've been in high school more recently. It's 2015, and let me tell you something. We have 16-year-old children reading at a second grade level, and I mean second grade level.
Yep.
If we can engage them in thought and writing, I don't care if they have to do threads and Twitter till they learn how to write. I'm saying we've got to start engaging our young people and seeing more for them. And if technology will do it, because they are already doing it, exploit the gifts and talents that they have, that they are digital natives, but they still need direction. That just because you're digital native doesn't mean that you're digitally proficient, doesn't mean that you're ethically aligned, but that is our job, is making sure that we keep our eye on what they are engaging with and making sure that we're then using it. Okay, but listen, you're going to learn something a little different. We're going to liberate your mind at this liberal arts institution. We're going to bring you to a higher level of consciousness and understanding. Come up with some ways and ask bigger questions. That's what our young people need to hear, and they need to know that they have access to these tools. And so we have to empower them with them and then train them how they should go.
Thank you. And we have our alumni and lifelong learners as well. It's not just our K-12.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
And our seniors, we need to engage.
And they are embracing it, honey. Let me tell you something. I know seniors in my church and stuff, girl, they like, listen, let me tell I have to write a letter to the board. I put it in this chat GPT thing. It said everything that I wanted it to say. I mean, they are embracing it because they're unafraid. They feel like they have lived their life and they know what they've missed out on, and they've been waiting for this time to make life easier for them too.
So we are going to get to, thank you for that, we're going to talk about ethics, codes of conduct, and then we're going to get into the job prospects for students. I do want to take this question to the back, and there's a lady at the very back there next.
I work at FPPR. My name is Natasha. But my question is leading into this ethics issue, because I think when we think about ethics, especially like in academia, we're thinking like professors aren't taking students' work. They write the paper and then the professor publishes. That's an ethics issue. But we see chat GPT and other forms of artificial intelligence that can help students with disabilities like ADD to be able to organize their thoughts. It's all their thoughts, but the skills that they need to be excellent could be a part of this tool, right? And so how do we, I guess, reconceptualize our attitude towards this tool that could be a tool for equity and racial equity, releasing gatekeeping of information and access to tools of like writing personal statements, writing application letters for graduate school, all those things that it could move us forward, but we have to like reframe how we're thinking about it as cheating or not working hard enough when we need these tools.
Do y'all remember Homework Helpline?
Yes.
You used to call the homework person and you just tell them they will help you through your homework. That was back in the day when you had the rotary phone, you had to call them. But Chat GPT is a little bit like Homework Helpline a little bit for our students, some of our students that struggle. And I'm a mom of 5 sons, and I have 2 sons that have autism. One has moderate support needs, and one is gifted, which is real interesting, that he's a twice exceptional child. But I also teach the Exceptional Learners course. And what we do is use emerging technology to help them differentiate instruction for all different types of learners. And AI is a game changer for those who struggle with dyslexia, who struggle with autism, you know, who struggle with processing disorders, dysgraphia, like just that can't quite conceptualize how to maneuver in this world, but are ambitious, disciplined, and determined to stay the course. We still have to understand that if we can increase the abilities of others who may not have the physical or cognitive ability, if we can create new neural networks in the human being that make them thrive and have a better quality of life, then that's something that we need to be trying to figure out how to use and how to use it for those types of good. So I'm really excited about what it could do for the neurodivergent, and everything that we do in my research lab is tethered to increasing inclusivity in STEM for those who are on the spectrum, because their workforce development model is not great. But it's not that they can't learn, it's that they need different types of ways to learn and to contribute. So it's important to use these kind of tools to even help caregivers and to help parents even understand how to help their children at certain various stages. But it's how we use it. But you made a great point. So I think that those things should be taken into consideration, because we have people who didn't have an opportunity to have certain types of therapies or certain types of access to care, and they need to use it to do simple things like their grocery list, or making sure that they are exercising, or their daily schedules, or things like that, and it just makes it easier so that they don't hit a wall.
Dr. Volsi Patterson, did you have anything to add to that? And I'm going to go to the question back.
Well, I mean, I agree with everything that was just said, but I also think the conversation is a little bit different when we're talking, say, K through 5, right? Because there we have to balance sort of what we had talked about before, whether the technology actually hinders or actually helps somebody at that age, right? Because that's the age where you really do need to learn, you really do need to acquire some of these skills and not depend on the machine to do it for you. So just a caveat on all of that. I think the conversation is different depending on which grade levels you're looking at.
At the very back, because she's been waiting for a while.
Thank you so much. I'm Carlota Ocampo. I'm the provost at Trinity in Washington, D.C. And I'm also a Howard-trained neuropsychologist. So I have a question for Dr. Volsi. But before that, I want to acknowledge this is my student that I ran into at the conference, who's the program director of Howard now. So I just have to say, I feel like there are generations in the room, and I love that. And when I see my students out, being their fantastic, amazing selves and being change agents, it's so rewarding. So I have to acknowledge Ms. Skipworth. So here's my question. You said earlier, Dr. Volsi, and I think, and anybody really, and I'm going back to way back at the beginning of the discussion, because I was at the back here. You said that people who stay off the grid are protected from AI because their information is not in the system. But my concern is this: based on the way that we know that humans think, humans will make judgments on minimalist pieces of data. Human beings will make big judgments about one piece of data, right? Like if I tell you, my family's from Colombia, you're already thinking all kinds of things about Colombia, right? Because human beings form data sets on little pieces of information. They form patterns based on those data sets. Is there a concern that by not putting data in the system, the AI is going to misrepresent who we are based on misinformation that's already out there about us?
Yeah, absolutely. The big question is the question of bias, and we can't minimize that in any way. As I said, there's a slight silver line, and it's slight. The question of bias and prejudice and extrapolating data, and the way you described it, that is by far the biggest issue. And I was simply stating that there's a small silver lining in the whole thing, in that some groups are a little bit more protected in terms of being able to replicate some of what they do, simply because it's not represented in the system, right? You can't paint you can't replicate a painting of some obscure tribe somewhere in some distant continent if that art is not on the web. You just can't do it, right? So that's all I meant. But in no way does that mean that makes up for the problem of bias, and absolutely no way. So bias by far the bigger issue here.
I want to move in the time we have left, Dr. Lyles. Let's talk a little bit about ethics, codes of conduct. What's next for your campuses? I don't know if regulate is the right word. How do you regulate AI, but how do you put things in place to ensure it's either running as it should or
So we don't want to say regulate.
Okay.
Because what I want to do is caution us as a community not to make it a stigma, not to make it a bad thing, not to make it sound wrong. And that's going to be very important when we look at how to embrace it. Now, everyone still has their varying level of acceptance, and everyone still has their varying level of what they're willing to do and have it do. But I think as a people, we oftentimes, well, the oppressed sometimes acts like the oppressor. And so in this case, we're trying to manage something that we don't fully have control over. We're trying to really set boundaries and put these stipulations in place, and it's not fair because it's not allowing our students and it's not allowing us to thrive in that space. It's not allowing us to do the things that we could potentially do if we did have all those tools readily available. And so at Claflin, we're really careful about saying regulate. We don't even want to say policy, right? But we're setting these guidelines. And so one of the things that we are doing is we're looking at it from a course by course basis, which means that for each course, the instructor decides if they're going to 100% allow ChatGPT and other generative AI tools, if they're going to do it under certain circumstances with specific guidelines based on different assignments where specified, or if it's just going to be strictly prohibited. And so we're having faculty to decide per course what that looks like. But we also know that that's just for fall, and it's probably going to maybe be relevant for fall in the first 4 weeks or so. Like, this is going to quickly shift, and it's going to quickly change, and we're going to probably pivot and figure out something else that may be even better or work a little differently as we just kind of figure out how the campus community works and uses it. But we also want to pay particular attention to ethics, because that's going to be important. And so when we look at ethics, we're looking at, all right, plagiarism, and are we copying, and are we using content that isn't ours but saying it's ours? But then we also need to look at it from a broader perspective of, are we using tools to do harm? Are we using tools that's gonna do bad? Because, for example, and I'm gonna use cybersecurity just to try to clearly illustrate this point. Cybersecurity, the students learn how to hack. All right, just because you know how to hack doesn't mean you should go hack someone's bank account, or you should hack the grading system. And so then those are ethics that they matter as well. And so we're looking at all of that when we talk about what does it look like from a student perspective, an instructor perspective, an administrative perspective, all these perspectives. And then we want to bring in the surrounding community. We want to bring in parents. We want to bring in their families. We want to bring in all these pieces, and it looks different for everyone. So we don't want to regulate it. We don't want to make it a taboo, but we do realize that it's going to vary. So, for example, Dr. Vulture, you mentioned K-5. Even still with English courses, some of our English professors see that students need to know how to write. So now if you're using this tool, you're not quite learning how to write. So maybe for some assignments it's acceptable, but these initial assignments where they're looking for a specific skill or a specific outcome to be reached, then maybe the student needs to write it themselves. And so that's where we start looking at what guidelines make sense that still enhance student learning and gives them what they need to succeed.
We still in the age of show your work.
Yes, show your work. My favorite.
Show me that output on ChatGPT.
Exactly. My favorite meme right now is the one where they say, oh, the teachers say you're not gonna have a calculator in your back pocket, right? So remember we were learning arithmetic, and you can't use the calculator was there. So I'm sure that caused some uproar, some disruption in the education. But now we have the calculator in our back pocket. And so these are all shifts. When the internet came out, probably even encyclopedias.
Use this word processor. They don't have me in no computer.
Exactly. So this is just something we're kind of learning. It's too new to put definitives on it, but at the same time we can try to just follow the wave and just kind of figure out as we go along, and that's what's going to be important here. We got to figure it as we go along. We can't make definitive answers, but I just really plead with you all that as a community, we don't make it a taboo. We don't make it a bad thing. We got to be proactive.
Let's talk about related coursework, majors. Are there majors and minors? Like, I'm not a science person, so what do students, HBCU students interested in getting into this space, what kind of classes should they take? What should they major in, minor in? And Dr. Vulture, I know you have a...
I think it's really nice, especially just computer. So AI naturally falls under computer science. And with computer science, it's broad enough to touch every field and every area, just because we need it. We use these tools. But then now when we're talking about this generative AI, it just even goes a step further, because everybody, while computer scientists may have developed this phone or had some piece, because I'm pretty sure it was interdisciplinary, everybody probably has a cell phone, right? And so there are ways that this still touches every discipline. And so it's not so much of you need to take this specific course or this specific course to be an expert in this area, because everybody does Google searches. No one needed special training to do Google searches. And so it's gonna match, or it's gonna fit into whatever field you're using it for, because it'll help with sociology assignments. It's gonna help with math assignments. And so it's kind of across the board when we talk about what areas to learn more. One thing they're talking about now are prompt engineers. And so these are the professions where you're writing the right prompt to get the output that you need. So it was mentioned earlier that you have a specific format for your assignments for your students to follow. Well, the right prompt engineer can master that easily, eyes closed, and they'll get the output that's expected. So it's gonna, and that's even with Google searches, you have to know what to look for, how to look for it, what keywords to use to get the data that you're expecting. But I will say, just in terms of understanding artificial intelligence as a whole, that'll get you a little close to understanding generative AI, would probably be some artificial intelligence, machine intelligence courses, because it just gives that background for which this generative AI was born.
So our students at Morehouse, but in the Atlanta University Center, we have the Data Science Center and Consortium too, which is also kind of like another discipline within it, so students can participate in data science rich opportunities. We have computer science as a major at Morehouse, as well as software engineering, and they teach about artificial intelligence kind of across the board there. For Morehouse in the Metaverse, which is across all disciplines and making virtual reality the classroom, and some of our models, our EdTech partners, VictoryXR, we're starting to have AI models of patients, of students, so that our education students can practice their student teaching with different representations of student models based on closed model sets. So like not this open large model where they're going to just give you any random answer. It's going to be full of the way, you know, data that's in that discipline. So for our healthcare professionals, they'll be able to work on bedside manner or communication with patients and families and those kind of things. One of the things that I want us to keep in mind, just in general, regardless to how it's being used in our or at our institutions, is that we use it. Not because HBCUs, honestly, comparatively, are resource limited. I'm sorry. Research, but limited on the amount of resources that we usually have access to, right? Whether it's actual cash flow or if it's actual access to equipment or things like that. Being in the metaverse for me meant that students who were taking this journalism class could work with complex cameras and camera equipment that we couldn't even afford, but they had access to, so that they were maintaining industry standards. In terms of using AI, same thing. How can we as HBCUs improve our own business model? I know that we're a community of people who are striving for education for the future generations, but I do know that we have operated too long under tradition, and that we need to improve our capacity and ability to show and highlight our talent and genius. And the way that we're gonna get in the game and get over 20 generations of oppression is if we embrace technology, innovate, be entrepreneurial in that pursuit, and support our young people as they going out into this workforce to develop. Because listen, we don't have generational wealth. I don't know anybody really that does in my immediate circle, and I'm around a lot of professionals and even CEOs. What I do know is I have generational knowledge, and that knowledge has to be placed in the right hands and has to be put out in the universe for our young people to be able to feast on. And that is my goal in evangelizing the use of these technologies, is that it improves our quality of life, quality of our education for our young people, and making sure that when they go out in the workforce, they're not feeling like, oh my God, they're using this this brand new computer system I've never seen. Nothing has ever gone this fast. I don't even know how to use it. Or these technical skills are still very necessary, and even the soft skills, the skill sets of collaborating, of creating, of communicating, of actually thinking critically. All those skills are still skill sets that they are gleaning from using this work. Like I said, AI is a constant thought partner in this, right? How can we get our institutions to be more research ready, coming up with strategies and strategic initiatives that are going to continue to bring and drive revenue, that are going to bring about better recruitment for students, that are going to allow us to go after these dollars that exist, but we don't have the bandwidth because we're so stressed out and our capacity is not enough. So it's not that we are not qualified, we are overly qualified. That's how Morehouse was able to be the first metaversity, is that we had the talent. We just needed the opportunity, right? And we just took the opportunity and stayed steadfast in it and embracing it. But what I realized, and even running this project, is everything in the corporate world or in the tech sector moves fast as lightning. Everything on our campuses, even academia in general, moves quite slow. Everything got to go to committee. And so, but that's going to be our hindrance. That's going to make us irrelevant as institutions of higher learning. When people are needing readily packaged information, and I'm not saying a good education isn't necessary, I won't say that, but you have so many organizations that are gearing up to eliminate people having to even have 4-year degrees, that it puts us in a real precarious situation if we don't start from the formative years teaching our young people that they have more to reach for.
Thank you so much. It's almost time to wrap. I want to come to Dr. Patterson for the faculty perspective, and Dr. Volsi has some exciting news to share about Spelman. And then I want to remind, I know we've had a few folks leave, we have some questions. Don't forget about the survey at the end. Check this out, Black Enterprise is hosting a hackathon for HBCU students. Please take a picture. Juniors and seniors can apply. It's this fall with American Airlines in Dallas. And everything's covered, travel, transportation, food. HBCU students have the opportunity to interview on site with American Airlines for job opportunities as well. So visit the website there. That's something Black Enterprise is doing in partnership with American Air. So that's just one of the ways that companies are recruiting HBCU students that are in coding, in computer science and engineering. I'm going to toss to Dr. Patterson, Dr. Volsi quickly, and then we have 2 more audience questions.
So in stressing the importance of AI for our students and the fact that this technology is going to cross all disciplines, all fields, it really is important for us to bear 2 things in mind. And I think the first is going back to this morning's plenary session where they were talking about economic mobility and the fact that having this kind of training, having this kind of exposure is going to be critical for our students to develop and to build generational wealth, to see opportunities for economic and professional mobility, regardless of whether they are in the STEM fields or not, because this technology is here and it's only going to expand. It's not going to shrink. You're not going to do less of it. We're going to be doing more of it. And so I think that that's one thing that's really important for us to bear in mind, that this is something that it is changing and will continue to change the educational landscape as a whole. But what that also means is that for the perspective of faculty support, faculty have to be willing to engage this, and really not just faculty and administration have to recognize and to understand that this technology is going to be critical for the advancement, for the development of our students. It's going to be important for the maintenance and the sustenance of our institutions. And so this is not something that we can bury our heads in the sand or pretend that it doesn't exist. And even if you are one of those individuals who says this is not something that I really feel comfortable with, I've got concerns about ethics, I've got concerns about bias, I've got concerns about how this might displace individuals in the workforce, when all of those things could potentially happen, what we do have to bear in mind is that it's here. And so it makes much more sense for us to take a proactive approach, if only to explore the technology, if only to examine it and to learn more about it before you determine that this is something that you don't want to do. Since we're not calling it policy, we're calling it guidelines. We want those guidelines to say, if you're going to say, students can use it in full, or they can use it in part, or they can use it for some assignments or others, you have to first know what this technology is. You first have to be mindful of it and aware of it and how to use it so that we can move this forward. If you have to be able to make an informed decision about what that looks like in your courses, what that looks at your institution. And the only way that that happens is if we are proactive in that engagement instead of just sort of waiting, because the students are already using it and engaging in it, and that's going to continue, right? So those people who didn't know about it in January of 2023, because it came out in November, certainly they're going into August 2023 and they're going to be fairly well versed. So that's something that we also have to in order to meet the students where they are, we gotta get down here to where they are.
Dr. Bolton.
I 1000% agree with what was just said there. And in fact, if I could leave a parting thought, is one of the things that I want us to be mindful of. I want us to imagine what this looks like 10 years from now. I've heard some categorical statements about, the AI is not going to replace professors and things like that. Well, that may be the case, but I think if we don't think about what exactly is possible, if we write that off as something that's unimaginable, impossible, we're setting ourselves up for some rude disruptions that could prove really disastrous. I mean, we saw in the plenary session, in terms of professions most likely to be affected, what was at the very top? It was educators, right? So even if it doesn't replace the professor, we could be looking at something that is so different from what we do today that in effect it has replaced professor and created something else. So I just want us to not just think about what we do today, but what is going to happen 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now, at the rate that this is going. ChatGPT 3.5 came out in November, and 4.0 came out in March. So I mean, this thing is moving really fast, and so just kind of thinking ahead about what this could mean, I think it is super important. What's the good news? It's supposed to be. Oh, that good news.
I was like, are you gonna get there?
My wheels are turning. All right, so Spelman has started a game design and development program, and it was just approved by the curriculum committee. So we have a game design
curriculum committee.
And within that, we do research in VR. And one of the things that we're starting to look at is using ChatGPT to give different personalities to the different people you meet within the virtual space. Right, so as you know, you can tell ChatGPT to personify a person with an entire backstory. I'm a drunk Marine going through a divorce and was a former electrical engineer, and that's your backstory. And then when you interact with that person, ChatGPT is able to then respond to your conversation in the context of that person, and you can have multiple personalities in the space. It is also the case, I know a comment was made over there that you can't interview someone, you can't ask ChatGPT to get an interview from a different person's perspective.
You can't if they're known.
That's correct.
I said not well known, not like if.
Oh, if it's not well
for
known.
me, like it's not gonna answer you in my voice if you ask.
Okay. But if the person has enough content out there,
if they have content,
absolutely
yes.
can. Right, you can tell it to write me a rap about the
Tupac's
UNCF
voice.
conference,
Yep.
and then you can say, well, can you write it to me in the style of DMX?
Yep,
or
and
the
it
style
will.
of Tupac, and it will do that for you.
Yep.
And when does the program launch?
It launched it was approved in May, so it's going to launch in the fall.
Awesome, congratulations,
Thank you.
congratulations. I want to pause here to thank our panelists for their time today. Again, please complete the survey. For those who want to stay just a moment, there are some more questions. So I at least wanted to thank our panelists first. There are some more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and take those. If you have to slip out, feel free to. Please complete the survey. For those that want to stay, there are several more questions. I'm going to start with this young lady at the back.
And before you all leave, you can contact me at unitethemetaverse.com. So for those people who want to reach out, unitethemetaverse.com.